Guys, I hereby call the City Council meeting for February 22nd to order. If everybody could please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. Ready? Begin.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you very much. Linda, roll call.
Councilmember Andrusik.
Here.
Councilmember Mercado.
Here.
Vice Mayor King.
Here.
And Mayor Sierra.
Here. Thank you very much. Do we have any reordering of the agenda tonight?
No, ma'am.
Okay.
Madam Mayor, because of the long item that we have, and apparently item 5 is a short, I wondered if we could take item 5 first versus having those here maybe for 5 having to wait.
Okay. Is that
That's okay with me.
okay? We'll take care of public hearings before, or business items before the public hearing then. Okay.
Okay.
All righty. Moving on then. Public comments. This is your opportunity to get up and speak for 3 minutes, give or take, on any item you want, including agenda items, although you could certainly wait till the agenda item comes up. It's anything you want to talk about, compliments, complaints, suggestions. I do have one speaker slip from Judith Dale, and if anybody else wants to get up now, grab a slip and fill it out. Ms. Dale.
I just want to compliment our local law enforcement. My brother is very, very handicapped, and on the evening of February 11th, an officer stopped by his house at 11:45 p.m. at night and rang the doorbell, and and my brother finally got up. The officer was very insistent, got up and told my brother that his garage door was open, which means anyone had total access into his house. And I mean, that officer went above and beyond. He could have just kept driving on by and not done anything, but I really appreciate our police force and what they do, and this is just one example of how they watch out for our Buellton citizens. So I just want to say thank you, our police force.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Any other public comment? All righty. Closing public comment. Sir?
Yeah, I had turned in a slip.
For public comment?
For the hub project?
Oh,
yeah, that'll come up.
Thank you. Thank you.
I promise I won't forget you. Okay, moving on to the consent calendar. We've got 3 items. We've got the minutes of February 8th, 2018 regular city council meeting, list of claims to be approved, ratified for payment to date for fiscal year 2017-18, and the monthly treasurer's report for January 31st, 2018. Motions, questions?
Make a motion for approval, ma'am.
I'll
Madam Mayor,
second.
1 through 3.
I'll second.
Linda?
Okay, Councilmember Andrusik.
Aye.
Councilmember Mercado.
Aye.
Vice Mayor King.
Aye.
And Mayor Sierra.
Aye. Thank you very much. Any presentations tonight?
No, ma'am.
Alrighty. Then we're going to skip public hearings. We'll come back to that, but we'll move to business items, which is agenda item number 5 for possible action. This is discussion and direction regarding filling the open council seat under Government Code Section 36512D. Mr. McEwen.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. This is a mea culpa item. We obviously had a snafu at the last meeting, and as I set forth in the staff report, we discovered belatedly the government code provision that prevented us from using the appointment process in this situation. We've had a very unusual set of circumstances here in Buellton, one that I'm not aware of happening in any other place, at least among my colleagues and other attorneys that I've talked to who are in the same field as I am, where we've had 3 vacancies in a 10-month period, and it's rare to have that many vacancies in any stretch of time, especially within an election cycle. But what happened was we were so accustomed to going through the appointment process that we agendized it again following Councilmember Reif's resignation. And what I should have discovered was this code section which says that you cannot use the appointment process if that would result in a majority of the council having been appointed. And in that circumstance, there are two options for filling that vacancy. One is to call an election to be held at the next regularly established election date, not less than 114 days from the call of the election. If you do not exercise that option, then the vacancy is filled at the next regularly established election date. At this point in time, the next regularly established election date is November, the general election in November of 2018. If I had discovered it sooner, I will be the first to admit, I think we would have had to have caught that in December while Councilmember Reif was still on the council. Then we could have started a process, perhaps had the election held in June. I did not catch it in time. And as a result, we went through a process last week where we had members of the public put forth their candidacy, and we had a process where there wasn't consensus on the council. So, for one, I apologize to the council, to each of you, for having put you through that. And I specifically apologize to Mr. Dorwin, Ms. Dale, and Ms. Sadecki. They put their names out there, and they put their necks on the line, exposed themselves, went through a process that was not easy, and for that, I really, truly apologize. I feel very bad that they went through that. And I apologize to the public. I don't like to make mistakes. You know, my job is to always have the right answer. Sometimes I do make mistakes. I try everything I can to avoid those situations. This was one that I didn't avoid, and I feel awful about it. But at the end of the day, what I have to do is tell you what the next steps are. So again, I apologize to everyone. But going forward, which is what we have to do at this point, I took a very careful look at these code sections, which I could probably be a city attorney for 100 more years and not have to apply this particular code provision. But in this circumstance where we already have two appointees, we have to fill the vacancy at the next regularly established election date, and that's going to be November of 2018. So at this point, what I'd be asking for is just consensus from the council. What we would be doing is bringing back a resolution at a meeting in March, most likely the first meeting in March, that would just put that into writing. We'd memorialize that in a resolution, but we'll also be working with the county registrar to get everything set up for the November election. And we have some other issues that we'll also have to address. Since we now have an elected mayor, it has created an imbalance in the election cycle where we have more seats than we would like to have up for election in November. So there's a process in the government code that we go through to make sure that that balance gets corrected going forward, and that'll be another item that we bring back at the next meeting for resolution.
Thank you very much. This is under business items, not public hearings, but I do have speaker slips. So I'm going to take, first of all, questions from council directed to city staff or our attorney, and then I'm going to call up the speakers.
Okay.
So are there
Sure.
any questions?
Not a question, just pretty much a
Any
feeling.
questions on this one?
Well, I just have one thing. Steve, could you expand on that process by which we're going to fix that imbalance just for the public's edification?
Yeah, we're going to address that too at the next meeting, but setting aside the vacancy issue that we have, we were going to have 3 council seats and a mayor seat up for election. So there is a one-time repair or fix-it process in the government code that would allow us to designate one of those seats to be a 2-year term, or to state that the low vote getter among the 3 winning candidates would be a 2-year term. So then it would stagger those seats so that in 2020 there would be 2 seats and a mayor, and then 2022, there'd be 2 seats and a mayor, and it would continue on in that fashion.
Okay, perfect.
Any other questions? Then I'd like to call Mr. John Dorwin up, please.
John Dorwin, 104 Six Flags Circle, Buellton, California. I respectfully disagree with the conclusion that the next regularly established election date is November. Government Code Section 365-12D, if the City Council does not call an election pursuant to subparagraph 2, the vacancy shall be filled at the next regularly established election date. My research is that Elections Code Section 1000A establishes the second Tuesday in April in each even-numbered year as the established election dates. Now, I understand the staff has attempted to consolidate our April elections with our November elections by ordinance, and I have expressed the opinion that that would be binding upon the council if we were a charter city. However, since we are a general law city, I believe we must follow Election Code Section 1000A. Further, Election Code Section 1002, except as provided in Election Code Section 1003, notwithstanding any other provision of law, all state, county, municipal, district, and school district elections shall be held on an established election date. So, how to resolve this? The chief elections officer for the state of California under the government code is the Secretary of State. I have called into his office pursuant to Government Code Section 12172.5 to seek advice as to how the city of Buellton may avoid another violation of the election code. And the Secretary of State is authorized to pursue election code violations with the assistance of a district attorney or the attorney general as appropriate. So I believe we should be reaching out to the state law enforcement official charged under the government code with enforcing the election laws of this state. And I believe this is a matter in which the council has no discretion. May is only found in subparagraph D2 of 365-12D. Had you scheduled the election not less than 114 days before the next election, which is the primary in June, you could have done that. You had discretion to do that, but we blew the deadline. Now, we're in paragraph D3. I do not believe that the council has any discretion whatsoever. I would defer to the opinion of the Secretary of State, but I believe the council must hold the election on the next regularly established date, which is April 10th, 2018, being an even-numbered year. Thank you. Any questions?
Well, that's not 114 days away.
Say again?
That's not 114 days away. This is February.
It doesn't matter. If you're under
City
3,
council call an election, they'll be held a regularly established election date
May.
not less than 114 days after the call,
May, that's your discretionary.
right?
3 is shall. The vacancy shall be filled at the next regularly established election date. If we go back to the elections code and we look at section 1000, the next regularly established election date for a municipal election in an even-numbered year is the second Tuesday in April.
Mr. McEwen?
I have a completely different interpretation of that section, and I've indicated that to the council, that having missed the June election, we go to the next regularly scheduled, regularly established election, which is November. And that's my interpretation, and that's my recommendation to the council.
Alrighty, our next speaker, Richard Kuzmich. Come on down.
My name is Richard Kuzmich. I live on 330 West Highway 246. My question is just, how does the council work with the vacancy? You're going to leave it open for about 10 months, right? 10, 11 months.
To the end of the year.
Till November. So with the 4 seats, and actually if you wait till November, everybody is due in 4 years, right? Except for the mayor. Mayor is 2 years.
There will be 5 spots on the November ballot for the
Okay.
Buellton City Council, 4 council members and the mayor's position.
And according to what the attorney said, so would the 2 lowest vote getters, if that's the process you use, would they go to a 2-year process to stagger that? Because you're going to have
Yeah.
4 people.
We're working on that with the county registrar, and I spoke with her this morning. She's in meetings in San Francisco, so it's going to be a discussion that will continue next week. But we talked about the 2 different options. One would be, as you've indicated, the 2 low vote getters would be 2-year seats, but we need to examine whether or not that's permitted under the government code. This is not a situation that appears to be addressed. Another option would be to have 3 boxes in the ballot, 1 for mayor, 1 for the 3 seats that would be up for election regularly in 2018, and another box to fill the vacancy left by Councilmember Rife. So we're going to look at those, and that will be brought back at the next meeting or the meeting after that.
And my other question, as far as the council, being you'll have an even number of council members, how do you break a tie?
It does not pass if it's a tie.
Oh,
It has to have a vote of 3 or unanimous in order to move forward.
okay. All right.
That's the law.
That's, yeah.
Okay. Well, that's all.
Hopefully we all get along really nicely. Huh?
Yeah, that was just my questions, how the process would work.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I don't have any other speaker slip for this item. If anybody else wants to get up and put in their 2 cents worth, now's the time. Okay, I'm going to bring it back to council then. Direction, comments?
I can start. I think we need to defer to Steve and let him figure out what the register comes back with and then make a decision. I think the council that we have now, we're haven't had many 3-2 votes, and I think our consensus is that we look at everything pretty logical and reasonable, and I don't see any reason why we couldn't get by till November. I don't see why. I don't think the city needs to spend whether it's $10,000 or $40,000 on a special election at this time. I think we have to look at the bigger picture and go from there.
Okay, thank you. Councilmember Andrews?
Madam Mayor, and I sincerely understand the predicament we find ourselves in as a result of a mistake. In the business world, there's something called errors and omission. The business I used to be in, if you make a mistake, you're subject to correcting the mistake at your expense. I see no need for the city to go to any expense to cure this problem. I do not want to. I just think it puts us in a bad state to say we're fine with 4 of us. Our charter is for, well, we're not a charter, so, or whatever we call the rules we operate under, says there will be 5 of us. And I think we're basically whacking 20% brain power off of the council by operating with 4. lots of things have happened in the past. I do believe that the strong effort to cure the problem sooner than later is better than simply saying, we'll all get along and everything will be fine. I don't like to see 5 seats on the November election, even though we've designated some will be 2 and some will be 4-year terms. But I think that we're just putting ourselves in a box. I wonder, had we had this situation with a resident somewhere, that we would be concerned about what they would have to pay to cure the problem for the error. And I understand, Steve, that you have apologized, and I fully accept it. We were just absolutely dumbfounded the next day to find out that the action we took. And a law firm as big as Burke Williams Sorensen seemed like it should have alerted somebody from December to February 10th, 9th or 10th, when we last met. So I just think this, you know, when we lost our redevelopment money, we hired your firm to represent us in a suit against the state to try to prevail. And you did as much as you could do, and we didn't win. But we spent way more on that than we're talking about spending to cure this, and I have no idea. It's not a dollar and cents thing. It's doing the right thing no matter what it costs. And I think, you know, I've used an analogy this last week. Someone pulls into a parking space and they hit the accelerator instead of the brake and they crash through someone's building. There's no, they clearly didn't want to do it. It's called error and omission. And for that reason, I ask that we get a full report. Perhaps we'll hear from the Secretary of State sooner than later, and I would like it to get on the front, stay on the front burner until we know what our legal options are. But I don't think we should be simply writing it off because of the cost of what an election would be. So.
And it is not because of the cost, it is because of the interpretation of this government code section.
Okay.
That it has to be at the next regularly established election date, so we can't call a special election whether we wanted to or not. So that's the interpretation
But
from the city attorney.
The April 10th is not a regularly scheduled election date?
It is.
Okay, there seems to be a discrepancy
Then-
in
well,
the speaker and
yeah.
our staff. So
Yeah.
perhaps some documentation from the Secretary of State would help us clear up the difference.
Vice Mayor King, any comments, direction?
Under this government code, we could have done this in June, correct?
If we'd gone early enough.
We would have had to have started the process like in January, as early to be able to get the pieces in place.
When do we know he was leaving?
December.
Okay. Just for the, you know, we've had some discussion on this, so I'd just like to, because nobody's mentioned anything about it, what would the cost be to have an election, a special election? And when could that person be technically seated if you could somehow get around that?
Well, hypothetically speaking, a special election would cost anywhere between $40,000 and $60,000. But my conclusion is that we can't fill the vacancy through a special election based on the restrictions in the government code.
Right. So even if we'd gone back to June, or started this process, just so everybody in the audience knows, even if we had started this process back there, it still would have cost us $45,000 to $60,000.
No, well, June wouldn't have been a special election, and under the subdivision, specifically, it does not authorize a special election, so you call an election at the next regularly established election date. So in June, I believe it would have been a much lower cost than a special election because it would have been consolidated with the county and with the statewide primary election. So I think in the past, we've looked at it in odd-numbered years, and it's a little different analysis. But at the time, I don't think that a lot of serious consideration was given to a special election because we had the authority to do an appointment.
So if we would have, even if we'd have been able to do this in April, which it says, even April, even number of years would have been April, the city would have been out that $60,000.
April would have been a different. We would have had to check with the county to see what, and I don't believe there is a county election in April.
Right. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. My only comment is I would appreciate it if you would just look at Code 1000A and 1002. I'm sure Mr. Dorwan is still going to try to stay in touch with the Secretary of State, but at this point, unless we hear anything different,
I have looked at those sections, but it's,
Then
my
we-
interpretation relates to the 36512D 1 through 3. Those are
Right
the
here.
sections, yeah.
Right up here. Okay. I appreciate it. Then we will continue as a four-man unit unless,
Person.
as
Or
one
person
person.
unit.
Four-person.
Fine. You've got direction. I appreciate you clarifying that for us. And we will, we all have our own opinions, but I agree with you, Councilmember Mercado. I think we play pretty well together.
Exactly.
I think we should be able to make it. Okay, moving on. Councilmember comments / items.
I'm sorry.
Did you want to
Go back to public hearing?
Yeah, we can do the other later.
Did you want to go to public hearing and then do council member and go for, I was just
think
flipping
that's-
4 and 5.
Yeah, because we have a large, some
There we
crowd
go.
in for that, so.
All righty. Public hearings with possible action. Agenda item number 4, we have 2 resolutions. Resolution number 18-02, a resolution of the City Council of the City of Buellton, California, approving a mitigated negative declaration, that's 17-MND-03, and mitigation monitoring and reporting program for the hub project located at the southern terminus of Industrial Way, Assessor's parcel number 099-690-053, and making findings in support thereof. Shall I read the second one, too?
Yes,
And then
please.
we'll just keep going. Resolution number 18-03, a resolution of the City Council of the City of Buellton, California, approving a final development plan, 16-FDP-06, and tentative tract map TTM 31061, for the hub project located at the southern terminus of Industrial Way, Assessor's parcel number 099-690-053, and making findings in support thereof. Mr. Beardzinski.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, members of the City Council. This is an application by Peter Halber, property owner, and Gavin Moore's applicant for a final development plan and tentative tract map for the hub. The project is located in the vacant piece of property between the golf course, Rancho de Maria, and Industrial Way and the Industrial Way businesses. The zoning is, the gray area is zoned for industrial and the green area is open space. It is part of the 100-year flood boundary, and there are floodproofing requirements as part of the conditions of approval. The project's size is 17.22 acres on assessor's parcel number 099-690-053. So the project is 3 components. There are 50 apartment units in a community center and 3 buildings with a mix of 1- and 2-bedroom units, 46,676 square feet of industrial space in 4 buildings, 28,000 square feet of office business space in 2 buildings with 4 rooftop residential units, 323 parking spaces, dedicated open space with public trails and paths, restoration of Zaca Creek, and a 3-lot tentative tract map for airspace condominium purposes to allow sale of individual units within the project at some point in the future. There's 1 primary access point through the adjoining parcel to Industrial Way. That is where access will occur. There is an emergency access point through the Rancho de Maria, and I want to clarify some information that may have gotten out there today. This is not an access point that will ever be used for commercial or access to any of the project other than emergency. That is part of the conditions of approval that have been worked out and recommended by the Planning Commission. So there is no access through Rancho de Maria as part of regular project when it's built. So this is the project site, and the two research and development buildings with are in yellow with the 4 rooftop residential units. The 4 blue buildings are the industrial buildings with variety of office space or industrial space, and the 3 residential buildings are up in the north end of the site. Zaca Creek runs along the north and the west side and will have restoration, as will the entire southern portion of the property that will be restored and have hiking trails that will connect to the river trail for the city. The primary access I mentioned is across this bridge, across Zaca Creek to Industrial Way. The emergency access point is the gate in this particular area. And there is also a pedestrian access gate being proposed for Rancho de Maria residents to access the public hiking trails through this particular property. These are the elevation plans for the hub buildings, the 2 buildings closest to the river with the business space and the 4 rooftop buildings or rooftop residential. It is agrarian in architecture per our community design guidelines. The industrial buildings, again, are agrarian, and they're in the center of the property. And the residential buildings, again, agrarian elements on the north end of the property. This project is in the M zone, but it is a mixed-use project, which is allowed per our code. You can have residential mixed with the industrial units per our code. Setback regulations are met. They have over 50% landscaping, which includes the restoration areas. Their open space for the residential is about 5 acres. The height is 37 feet, which is below the 45 feet maximum allowed in the zone. And the residential density is 3.2 units per acre. Through the mixed-use ordinance, they could have had 8 units per acre, which would be about 140 units as opposed to the 54 that they currently have on the site. Parking, 323 spaces are provided and 306 spaces are required per our municipal code, and bicycle parking is provided throughout the site. Signage, 200 square feet is allowed for industrial. They're around 262, so we're going to have to do some changes to some of their sign area, which is a condition of approval. So the primary ID sign is a little large at their entrance, so I think that can be dropped down. Their wall-mounted signs are pretty consistent, and the wayfinding signs I think are going to have to be dropped in size because they exceed our code requirements. But we have this as conditions, and we've talked to the applicant, and they'll be working through a revised sign program moving forward with the project. Affordable housing, with residential, we do require 15% to be affordable to lower, low, and moderate, and that would be 8.1 units. The applicant is proposing to pay an in lieu fee for these units instead of constructing them on site. He is planning on workforce housing as desired by the Planning Commission, and he worked with them to develop a condition to target the local workforce, where 50% of the units would be marketed to the tenants of the hub project for occupancy by their employees. Following that, they would be made available to workers on Industrial Way and then to qualified residents of Buellton before the apartments are marketed for rent outside of Buellton. So this would be required as part of the zoning clearance, and there's a definite need because we've talked to businesses out on Industrial, and their employees need a place to stay. They're coming from Lompoc, and they just probably stay in the units sometimes. So this would be a needed place for employees for these types of businesses to reside in. And both of these are conditions of approval. Trails and habitat, several public trails are proposed to be constructed that would connect with our river trail, and this is all being done by the applicant, and then they would be dedicated for public access but maintained by the applicant. And the area to the south as well as Zaca Creek would have habitat restoration. storm drain inlets throughout the project site, primarily in the landscaped areas, and they go to 2 on-site detention basins to stop the water from getting to the river and percolate into the ground, so not to impact the river. We did a mitigated negative declaration for the project and has been circulated for public review on December 19th through January 18th. One letter from Caltrans was received prior to the close of the comment period, and we included a response letter to Caltrans in the initial study that you have with you. And we do not follow the same methodology in the city as Caltrans does, so that is part of their comments that we didn't do it correctly, which we disagree with. And ATE has done a response, and Dick Poole from Associated Transportation Engineers is in the audience to address that as well. But again, Caltrans has no permit authority, is not a responsible agency on this project, and part of the reason we have a traffic signal at Industrial was to allow types of development such as this on Industrial Way and not impact the traffic on 246. We did receive a letter from Fish and Wildlife after the close of the comment period, which we've included. Basically, our mitigation measures do address the comments from the Fish and Wildlife, and the applicant has worked with them as well on design of their project. Again, traffic study, no impacts to the surrounding circulation system based on staff analysis and our traffic analysis from ATE. And again, the signal is installed at 246 to address development of this particular area. We had a biological study and peer review, air quality and greenhouse gas analysis as part of the initial study as well. The Planning Commission adopted Resolution 1801 recommending the City Council adopt the initial study mitigated negative declaration, and Resolution 1802 recommending approval of the project to the City Council. There were additional conditions from the Planning Commission to address concerns from Rancho de Maria that are conditions of approval. This includes constructing the bridge over Zaca Creek as the first item constructed, so construction access would occur over that bridge and not through the Rancho de Maria area. So the construction access would be limited to Industrial Way, but occasional access could occur during the eastern gate with 72 hours notice to Rancho de Maria Homeowners Association and their approval. So that's, if they have something on occasional basis that needs to get through there, they do have to go through Rancho de Maria for that. There will be security cameras at the vehicular gate and the pedestrian gate. Disclosure to residents and tenants of this project to not trespass on the Rancho de Maria area. Working with Rancho de Maria on the eastern perimeter landscaping to make sure appropriate screening materials are placed along the eastern boundary between the two projects. Again, the emergency access gate is that. Emergency access only. It's a lockbox for the police and fire. There's no other access for anybody in this development to use that as a regular traffic way to get in and out of the project site. And the eastern pedestrian access gate is for Rancho de Maria residents only. They will have a code to get through the gate to get to the public hiking trails and get back to their development. So the recommendation is that the City Council consider the adoption of resolutions number 1802 and 1803, approving the mitigated negative declaration and approving the project. And you do need to do separate motions for each, with the environmental first and then for the project second. And staff is available to answer any questions.
Okay, so first of all, we'll take questions from council before I go to the public. Any questions?
I think just since this project has been, there's been a similar type of project, use of that property, and the sticking point has always been the bridge. And I just wanted to make sure, it sounded like you were very clear, that will be the first item.
That is correct.
That will not be delayed in any way, shape, or form, and I know Gavin...
That is correct. And we do have Gavin here to speak after council questions.
That would be it, but I just wanted to make sure that people recognize that this parcel is only being developed because of the substantial investment that's being made to it, not just another simple piece of property.
Yeah. All righty. Vice Mayor, we have the developer, one of the developers, Gavin Morse here, and city staff, if you have questions.
Yeah, I do have questions. under, this would be for Mark, under our zoning ordinance 19.18.116, it says allowable mix of uses. And there's a chart, figure 18.1, that said allowed mix of uses. In that chart, it says in manufacturing zones, RS is not permitted, RM is not permitted, PRD is not permitted, MHP is not permitted, and only commercial neighborhood, commercial residential, and commercial service are only allowed with the development plan.
And this is multifamily, so
It says it's not allowed. Look at, there's your chart. Right out of our code, right out of our zoning ordinance.
if you see the M zone, across from it is RM, has a DP, and that's means multifamily is allowed in the M zone in mixed use.
Where are you referring to? Okay, my mistake.
No other questions?
Maybe for the developer.
Gavin, would you mind coming on up and?
Yes, sir.
Vice Mayor, questions for Mr. Morse?
Or do you want him to make his presentation first?
Please make your presentation.
Thank you. All right. Miss Sierra, fellow council members, my name is Gavin Morse. I think what I'd like to do is to start out by giving a little bit of an overview and history, especially following the Mayor's talk yesterday. Well, we have to click it.
And I'll do it for you.
Okay. So there's a number of probably space points. So if we talk, when you were talking about yesterday and Buellton, Servicetown, USA, it reminded me to go back and think about, okay, that's where the freeway once was. Now, how did Buellton adapt when the freeway was moved and relocated? Okay, Mark. And what it took me back to is looking at the Buellton's economic development plan and Buellton's general plan, because Buellton and cities going forward make decisions based off of initially a vision and then subsequent plans that are developed based off of that vision to determine a path of action of how to designate property, how to plan for future growth, and where that future growth should be. When we looked at the hub and we looked at coming up with the general concept of what we wanted to plan there, obviously the first and the easiest look was just to look at two 45-foot tall square boxes and build them at 70,000 square feet and put them on there. But it's not really creative and it's not really the highest best use of the space. And it happened to really be one of the reasons when we were walking on Industrial Way and talking to particularly local people that worked within the buildings that were actually there and talking to them where did they come from and looking at the traffic impacts primarily on 246. And what we found is that if we could find, there is a really strong demand for housing for people that work in the community, that commute from out of the area. And so we came up with a design plan for the hub. And it's really in conjunction with the economic development plan that the city adopted and also the general plan as well, as Mark has just pointed out. The hub will provide jobs and provide growth for local companies and economic benefit for Buellton and the residents. Now, I'm going to talk a little bit more about the immediate residents and talk about some of the site designs and where we came up with that. So when we look at the use design, what you'll see is for a mixed use, I go back to providing less commuting traffic and less actually pollution as well, driving back and forth from the immediate areas where people commute into to work in these locations. Not to mention the additional jobs, etc., that will be brought by this project. So what are the advantages? It's a reduced traffic pollution, more efficient use of land. I'll explain to that when we actually get to see one of the site plans there. And a diverse range of employment. So it's, while we are looking, obviously this is a heavy ag area, there's a lot of technical companies that work within the ag field. I spoke to one of my friends today who's involved in a large berry farm operation. That's an international company that has close ties to Cal Poly. There's a lot of opportunities that if we can provide some diverse range of structures and diverse range of design within this project. So there's a synergy of use in between the light industrial, the residential units and the hub. The hub building is originally designed for the concept of having common area conference room, smaller offices. So if you are in one of the light industrial units, you could actually go ahead, use the conference room, you can actually go ahead and expand with your office space into those other areas. Because a lot of the industrial units that are built in right now in industrial way don't have really the ability for office staff to expand as a company grows. Mark touched on it a little bit. How are we going to do what I would call the local preference housing for the residential components? That starts in a series of marketing, which is in our conditional approval, for which there are 184 conditions of approval, where we actually start marketing immediately within people that are interested in leasing within the hub. Then we move out to people who are on businesses on industrial way, and there are set time periods for that. Then we move to people that are actually living in Buellton already. And those are the steps before we go out marketing outside of this area. The last comment down there, I really think this is it's a unique and it's a creatively designed project. A lot of time, effort and energy has gone into this, and a lot of coordination on with the state agencies, Fish and Wildlife, and doing a lot of biological and environmental studies as well. So this is the site plan, and if you can see, the light's not too good here, but if you see the residential units are down in the bottom left-hand corner, and then you move into the 4 light industrial buildings, and then beyond that is actually where the 3-story hub buildings are. The reason why we wanted to do that is we spent a fair amount of time on the Rancho Maria property looking across and seeing what the visual impacts would be and how those could be minimized in compared to a 45-foot tall square box, for example. So that's why we actually incrementally increased the height of those buildings with the residential units there at the lowest, then stepping up into the light industrial and then the hub buildings. So what did we do for project outreach? Communication is always the best form and a good foundation for any type of design, and I realized the importance of this when we met with some of the Rancho Maria homeowners who came to we have 3 what I would call open town meetings where anybody at the HOA was invited to attend, and then 1 meeting just with the HOA residents as well, HOA board members. There were consistent comments that came up, and one of those comments was the gate, the access, and what was going to be utilised of that gate. And what we came up with the final design, and I'll preface all of this by saying, the property on which which this project is located on actually has an easement, an access easement in place right now for ingress and egress that was granted when the Rancho de Maria property was granted a sewer easement through the northern portion of this property as well. So it was an exchange of easements. Sewer access was granted to Rancho de Maria to allow that development to happen, and then an ingress-egress easement was granted to this parcel for future use. Nobody really knew that was in existence. I mean, I'll be the first to admit it did take some digging, but we're not proposing in any way to use this for an ingress or egress location for this project. We sat down with Rancho Maria and we agreed on an electric gate. It will have a knock box outside. It is set, so a knock box is an emergency access box for a fire brigade, etc. And that is where the use is restricted. We also looked at, if you actually go to the next slide. Okay. So this was one of the primary requests, and then the next request was a secured gate that is at the southern portion of the property, and I can show that to you in the site plan in a minute. And that was where people from Rancho Maria obviously walk across the property and get to Industrial Way. So we agreed that they would have control of this lock. It would be a push-button lock where they would have control of the code, so they could control who actually had use of that gate. We obviously added pathways so that this will go across the southern portion of the property and link directly to the bridge and directly to Industrial Way. The next thing that we agreed upon was, and I'll show you the location, installing security cameras at the east property line gates. So that's both at where the emergency ingress and egress is, so that if anybody was trying to get through there, we'd be able to document that, and also at the pedestrian gate on the southern portion of the property. We provided additional screening for rooftop equipment. One of the residents of Rancho de Maria pointed out how they could see some of the equipment that was on the Terravant buildings. So you'll see in a couple of slides here how we proposed for a 2-foot high parapet wall and then an additional screening wall at the center of the roof around anywhere any equipment will be located. We agreed on additional landscaping as well along the property line between us and Rancho de Maria. Okay. And then we agreed to add into a disclosure to any tenants that no use will be prohibited, and we're going to speak adequate legal counsel to address and how we can put that in tenant documents, etc. So this is the site plan, and you'll see to the right there where the trails are located, and if you do that again, Mark. So this, I know it's labelled and hit it again. Sorry, I went a little bit crazy in this present. You'll see the arrows, the industrial buildings. Okay, go on, and again, and then with the hubs. And so these are where the paths are laid out. You can see right at the top there, that's where the gate comes in, just the south of the retention basin that will link into the bridge. Okay. This shows you where the arrow with this the 6-foot emergency electric gate with the Knox box will be. Okay, Mark. And then these shows you the location of where we planned on security cameras, etc. That one more. I think that's it, that would address any entrance into the property as well. And I'll be perfectly honest, there was a lot of fiery comments at some of the Rancho de Maria meetings, and I think we took all of those comments in, and even at the Planning Commission hearing, we continued some of those comments, and I think that we did a pretty good job in addressing all of their concerns. Thank you. So architecture, there's a couple of buttons there. So density and design is obviously the first thing that we look at with architecture. If you look at the architecture, I think was in your, the density that was in your information there, it's about 8.16 units per acre, and we're coming in at 3.2. So we're substantially lower than the density, we're substantially lower than the height limitations on the parcel. This is the tallest structure on here, which is the hub building, and it's obviously, as Mark said, it's designed in the agrarian design thing. Okay, Mark. This gives you a side view, shows you the heights, 34 feet to the top of the plate. There's an additional 3 feet there for right at the ridge line there, but we still are 7 feet under the maximum height. Okay. This is just a section through the building. It shows the open space there within the hub building, the articulation, how you get up to each of the stairs. This is a open floor plan. For sure, but all the floor plans are consistent. You'll see that there's, in the blue is where the central conference area is, and then on the left and the right is open areas with restrooms and for additional offices or research areas. Okay. This is the residential component, and you'll see here that what we have is a mixture of siding and metal roofs along with stucco. There's another end view. And this actually talks about the height, so you'll see that we're at 21 feet here. I mean, the story poles were up for a significant amount of time there, and it was actually good to hold one of the meetings at Rancho de Maria in their clubhouse and to look at the story poles and to figure out where we could place trees for additional screening. Okay. This is the floor plan of the residential units, and you'll see there that are 1 and 2 bedroom units, and that's how we calculated the parking for 1 and 2 bedroom units as well. This is the light industrial units. These are in 10,000 square foot pods that are divided so they can be divisible up into 2,500 square foot units. Shows you the height there, and you'll see that thin line on the top of the roof actually shows you where the additional screening would be for any equipment. And it shows you that also that this plate there is still 16 feet lower than the maximum height required. Okay. This is the community centre in the hub. That is at the closer to the residential component. And it's really meant as a joint use between tenants in the light industrial buildings, because driving around here we saw that there were people there having lunch at a picnic table out in the parking lots, and so we provided a facility there that will be for day during the use for the light industrial tenants, and then of the evenings obviously for residential. That's just a simple floor plan showing the inside. And this shows you the project rendering really from a different view, a little bit higher up. And this is the view from the entrance over the bridge into the property. Landscape, we spent a lot of time coordinating with landscaping. You'll see where I marked on this slide additional planting and screenings that were not to be the London sycamore, another more native species of sycamore that is already along the property line of Rancho Domeria, but had died in a drought. So we worked out where we would plant those early on in the construction, provide irrigation for them. And then we are going to retain the existing hedge between the properties and add additional hedge material to fill in where there are gaps. This just gives you a little bit more detail on the plants. We can go to the next one. That's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Questions from Mr. Morse?
Well, I just have one comment. I saw this initially in the Planning Commission stage when it was first brought to us, and some of the architectural changes that Gavin has made for the buildings, I think are great. Plus for this, I think you've been over backwards to work with the Rancho de Maria people, and I know we had concerns about the landscaping, and it's nice to see that you've added more trees and so forth. I think you've done a great job since I saw it initially, and like I said, in Planning Commission.
Thank you. I think it was important that we spent a fair amount of time reaching out and meeting with the Rancho de Maria. I understand the impacts. I understand the visual change, and change is never easy to accept. But it's much easier if you can explain and adequately convey information instead of misinformation that can be circumvented pretty easily these days.
Any
I
questions?
appreciate your innovativeness.
Thank you.
You were putting work, and we always talk about walkable communities. That's a very walkable design. Thank you.
I think you have, again, I think you've taken ideas, concerns from the community. It's not as dense as it certainly could be, which I appreciate. And I think it's a very nice looking project. Vice Mayor.
I'm sorry.
Yeah, excuse me.
Gavin, you mentioned the density versus, so it was 8.6 and per acre. What would the number be in the 8.6 versus the 50? I think
It would be about 140 or so.
140. Okay, because somewhere along the line we had 108, but I came up to 140 more or less. Quite a concession.
Vice Mayor?
I have a couple of concerns about this whole project. My biggest concern is the residential element. My biggest concern is the residential element, for starters. There's only one way into this and one way out. Mark and I looked at this, and my biggest concern is, I worked in Los Angeles for a long time, and my biggest concern is parking. And that has, it says on the plans, and I do have the large plans, I didn't bring them here because I don't think everybody wants to see that. But it has parking for 79 cars associated with that residential. Now, if you do simple math, I mean, you get a one-bedroom apartment, people don't have one person living there. I know you're only allowing, and maybe that's our code, or maybe that's our zoning, or whatever. But if I have a one-bedroom apartment, there's going to be two people there, and two people are going to have cars. Because you say, okay, yeah, well, it's walking distance, et cetera, but nobody's walking to Albertsons and carrying their groceries back to this project. They have to have a car. They're also going to drive to work. So part of my concern, for starters, was that element is does not have enough parking spaces. Now, you could possibly make a change with some of that landscaping that you had in the center and put additional parking there. I mean, you have the space to do it, is what I mean. My concern is, right, is where Mark's got the arrow there, is where you could take that landscaping and maybe make some additional. Because realistically, I mean, if anybody here in this room has been to Santa Monica, you know, the joke was, welcome to Santa Monica, no parking. You know, unless you had a special permit to park there, et cetera. So I'm very, you know, edgy about not having enough parking spaces associated with multifamily units like they have down in Santa Monica. So that's for starters. The other one is that emergency exit that you have on there. What if the people in this project need to get out of there?
In an emergency?
Right. I mean, do they have access to go through that gate somehow?
The only access to that gate is for emergency ingress and egress.
Right. What I'm saying is, how do they get through it if there is an emergency?
Well, if there's an emergency, the fire department or some other...
Well, and we're waiting 10 minutes for the fire department. I don't want to sit behind that gate if that bridge is out.
Maybe not the fire department or the local sheriff is pretty diligent and looking at garage doors.
Right. So that's going to be locked, is what you're saying?
Yes.
Okay. So there's...
Well, it's an electric gate.
Right.
There's a knock box on it.
Right. I get that. So the fire department could come through that.
Yes.
Right. But you can't go through that if you're a resident.
No.
Okay, so that's kind of part of my concern of where this is having residential element. I kind of don't like mixing apples with oranges is what my problem is, and you're putting a residential element down there at where Terravon is. And any of us in this room that have been around Terravon during harvest, any of you, bang, 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 there's dozens of trucks coming in and out of there, and they're constantly making noise. It's a 24/7 operation, and it is just horrendous, the noise that comes from that Terravon operation. I personally wouldn't want to live there, for starters. I mean,
Well, we're not planning a Terravon operation. If I was, I'd be building...
you know what I'm saying is, if I lived there in one of those apartments, that noise is going to be horrific if I lived there in that apartment.
I can appreciate your opinion, and I think we can agree to disagree, and I also don't think this project is turning Buellton into Santa Monica or LA. So
I'm not saying that, but that's just my whole problem with this, is having a residential element in it, is because I know that there are going to be constant complaints from the people that live there. And this is the cynic in me, because I was in law enforcement and I've seen the worst in people. Complaining about cars being parked in front of their house, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Okay, so my biggest concern is that just the residential element in there, for starters, is that you're putting it right into a manufacturing area.
Councilman King, maybe I wasn't clear enough in my initial opening comments, is that the goal of this is to not increase traffic and to increase parking. The goal of this is to provide what is commonly known as the mixed-use project, which the Urban Land Institute and a number of others well-respected groups that study these projects produce data and statistics to support that this is the best way to do commercial design right now, where you are limiting traffic, where you are limiting and encouraging, in particular, people that live and work within a close community. It's
right. I understand that. But the other thing is that associated with this project is 323 parking spaces.
316.
So I don't know if anybody in this room realizes how many 323 cars are that would be going down one road with one way in and one way out. So I'm thinking in my mind, you know, once again, being law enforcement, that you're going to sit through about 3 cycles of that traffic light at the 246 just to get out of here.
Well, that's an assumption.
Well, I think it's a very well calculated assumption, because as towns grow and you're only allowing a one way in and one way out of this, you know, we're not just talking about the people that work here, we're talking about people that also live there.
I'm confused. Are you suggesting that we'd be better off if we used the entrance through Rancho de Mira? Is that your proponent?
They're not going to allow you to do that, but I'm saying that when this project goes in, that industrial is going to be severely impacted by this project. And if it were just, in my mind, once again, the cynic in me, if it was just the commercial people down there, I wouldn't really have that much of a problem with that. I have a problem with putting residential on this property.
I respect your opinion.
Okay.
And just to clarify, for trip calculations, when we did the analysis, during the highest hour of traffic, we're estimating about 100 trips during 1 hour, and that's the PM peak hour. The rest of the day, those trips are spread out during the day.
Okay, I'll defer to the public.
Okay. And I had a comment, but I'm not sure if I should do, I usually hold my comments till after the public has gotten up to speak. So, thank you very much.
You're welcome.
All righty. I'm going to public hearing now and calling speakers up. I've got a few speaker slips. If anybody else wants to speak, now is the time to turn in your slip. Thank you, Peggy. Our first speaker, and I apologize, John Olejnik. I'm so sorry.
Can we maybe defer until Dick Poole gets back in, because this is a Caltrans comments, and I'd like Dick Poole here. Because I think he
went to the restroom, I think.
Yeah.
Okay, could I hold you off a little bit? But first tell me how to...
Dick, ready? Okay. No, he can... Dick is back.
Thank you.
There.
Thank you.
Yes.
My name is John Olejnik. Yeah,
Thank
but
you
close
very
there,
much.
That's
I
fine.
am so sorry.
That's very, no problem at all. And I'm a planning manager at Caltrans, District 5. Our office is in San Luis Obispo. And I'm specifically overseeing our development review and sustainability branches of our district office. I'm here tonight with my colleague, Michael Ollier. He's our specific planner who's assigned to Santa Barbara County and the cities they're in. So we're here tonight not as a lead agency, not as a responsible agency as far as CEQA is concerned, but we're here and we drove down because we want to introduce ourselves to you as your planning point of contact. As your partner, we are interested in a transportation system that's safe, that's sustainable, and that it fits the needs of all users. That's what we seek. But the reality is we are the owner-operator of Highway 246, and particularly our area of concern is the intersection of now 246 and Industrial Way. For this development that you're hearing now, and others that have been recently approved, like for example the network, we bear the load on our shoulders of the increased trips, the increased delay from the one-way in and the one-way out. So that said, there were many technical points that we did make in our comment letter about the traffic study. The response provided to our comments, just as technical, was only made available recently to have an opportunity to review. So we're not going to tonight even attempt to try to delve into any of those issues. We want to respect your time and not go there. Really, even when my own engineers try to explain it to me, my eyes glaze over and it's hard to follow. But again, as your partner, there are a few points that we'd like to just highlight, bring to your attention. Non-technical, we don't want to go there with you tonight as far as that's concerned. So our first point is that despite the technical agreements, just alluded to, you can't argue that there has been significant cumulative growth in the area at this intersection. Industrial Way is the hotspot, and it will continue to grow, and traffic operations will continue to be affected by that at this key intersection. So I guess the question is, what's the smart move now with that in mind? Well, we hope that we don't take development there and additional growth and drain the available capacity. We don't want to take things to the absolute cusp of what's an impacted facility or not. We don't want to drain what's left of there of capacity. And then when one more applicant comes in the door to the counter and they have a project, then you have a real problem, and that's a difficult conversation. Because in reality, the constraints are so much, and the fact that they're just one applicant, it's hard to really make significant changes. With the cumulative picture in mind of things having already been approved. So again, these conversations are difficult to have, but talking about them today is definitely the key. In your briefing, or however you have it presented to you, it's really difficult to truly validate how many trips are going to access from this development. What are the true number of trip generation counts that are going to access 246? The signal that is there is an important element. but maybe there are other important intersection improvements that could occur. We don't know because we don't really have a true picture of what are the impacts there at that intersection. Maybe there's the need for some improvements in channelization. What we do know is that there's no right turn channelization in or out. And we do know that there are 2 vacant lots for the potential of incorporating that. So that's just part of the things that still need to be determined with time and to figure out. A second point is we want to just talk about circulation. While, again, in listening to the comments tonight, while it may take some administrative adjustments, it is a good idea to allow for secondary access to Industrial Way, and more than just in an emergency environment. Where that is, you'll have to work on that. Maybe it is Shadow Mountain Drive, but prohibiting commercial traffic, that might be a way to help resolve some of those concerns. But good site planning definitely is the key to that success of that, as if that is even an option open for discussion. And it sounds like, again, maybe even the easements are there, is what I seem to hear tonight. And lastly, it just doesn't escape our notice when we look due east of where this is on 246 to the area of McMurray and some of the new commercial developments there and the way that the traffic operations work there now. It doesn't escape our notice some of the impacts there. And the details of our correspondence that we provided on this development were in the very similar vein and have been very consistent as what we have said in the past about the other side of the highway at McMurray. So that's why we're here tonight, to bring those points to light. Enhancements that could be done at Industrial Way, they're good for traffic, they're good for the CHP, and I used to be employed by the CHP, and I know specifically firsthand that that's the case, and it's ultimately good for the business to have good traffic operations there. So thank you for your time. We see this as a regional concern because problems on 246 in Buellton become problems for your neighbors on 246, your neighboring cities as well. So what we're asking is that as your partner, we're asking that you hold this decision in abeyance just for a little bit of time to allow further study at the response to the comments that we were glad to receive today, and give us a little time to be able to communicate with the city, to communicate with the traffic engineers associated, however we need to. It was an offer we made in our letter that we submitted on January 18th, and that offer still stands. So thank you.
Thank you very much, and we look forward to working with you. Thank you, Mr. Olenek.
And if I just may address a little bit, since that's fresh in our minds, and maybe Dick Poole may want to address that as well. But we did a full cumulative analysis of all the projects, and the intersection is going to be at worst level of service C, which is acceptable for most jurisdictions and cities. So we did that analysis and did that full analysis. And fire department and other police have no problem with the single point of access as far as fire safety, etc. So we don't feel anything through Rancho de Maria or another one to Industrial Way is warranted. And as far as I would disagree with their statements regarding the developments towards McMurray. We've tried to get Caltrans to help us put in signals or something like that, and they rejected those types of things unless something major happened. So we tried to work with them, and we did not get any response from them as we've moved forward on that development. So I don't know if Dick wants to, maybe Dick can give a little bit more input on the traffic.
Mark, you know better than to ask me for an opinion. I'd like to go back about 20 years. 20 plus years ago, we had a general plan for Buellton, and we did a study on that. We looked at every parcel and what could be built on that parcel. And so we have done this, and then it's been updated a couple times, and we do it every time. We also did it when we did the Avenue of Flags specific plan out there, which just finished there. Mr. Brzezinski and his planning staff make us go through all those things. Well, they don't make it. We're part of their team to do it. We're basically city staff in those situations. So we have looked at, over the time, the full development of Buellton.
And we've done a lot of these things. There is, I will admit, that the interchanges that were built and the way they were built by Division of Highways, actually, on McMurray Road and everything is pretty tight in there, and it weren't. We had an option to move the ramp and change the configuration. We got very little support from Caltrans on making that, and subsequent decisions have, although we still have the right-of-way there to do it, unless it's been abandoned unknown mileage. But basically, what I say to the council is, this is not a helter-skelter development just being dropped in, and this is part of the planned development that we've worked on. We went out and counted all the driveways out there on Industrial Way when we were evaluating these, because Mark and I had the same discussion about, is this good enough access? Is it going to work? Are our trip generations? And we looked at the counts we got. They're very consistent with the industrial rate that we're using for developing other things. So we've done all this, and I'm very comfortable that the way we're coming up with the numbers and so on and so forth, for the way the projects operate in Buellton, they're very consistent and they all work out there. If we had more room and we could put more channelization in, the turning movements don't require it. We have enough at the intersection. The one intersection that we have is McMurray Road, and Rose and I've been working on that 5 years, trying to get that. We got right-of-way problems and everything else to get in there to put in the other improvements. So we have done the planning and such, and the research in there. We do, I do have one comment on Caltrans. They're very good at getting a letter in 2 days before a hearing. Almost every time, if we're going to have a planning commission hearing, we can say, well, it's 2 days, where's our Caltrans letter? Because it happens not only on projects in Buellton, but all throughout District 5. That's their MO to do that. And so if you want to make things work better, then get your comments in also. But I don't know. Like I said, I'm sorry.
Thank you, Mr.
If there's any questions, I can answer it. But basically, I've been doing this since 1990 in Buellton, so I'm pretty familiar with how we've done it and where it is.
Thank you very much, sir. All righty, Jim Fulick, please step up, sir.
Don't press it yet. Don't press it yet.
I'm waiting.
Ready?
Take a deep breath.
Go. Madam Mayor, City Council members, directors, managers. My name is Jim Fialick. I've been working in Buellton since 1981, been living in Rancho de Maria since its inception in 1987. Oscar Wilde said, "Experience is just another word for the mistakes we have made." My experience here in Buellton has shown, with all due respect to the mistakes that we've mentioned tonight, quite a few mistakes. Some have been detrimental to me living in Rancho de Maria. Some have had a neutral effect. Some have been beneficial. Marcus Tullius Cicero said, "We all make mistakes. Only a complete idiot continues to make them." The gentleman from Caltrans mentioned project we have across from Albertsons at McMurray and 246. I don't think anyone would argue that there is an ingress-egress problem there at times. We have a problem on industrial right now at times, getting out of industrial. Also, the gentleman from Caltrans said, well, hey, maybe it will be Shadow Mountain. There's an easement there in perpetuity. Oh, it's never going to be used. It's never going to be used. Cicero. Only a complete idiot would make the same mistake over and over again. I'm not willing to share my experience to mistakes that perhaps, oh, it's an emergency now. We have too much traffic on industrial. We have to open up that. Even though the promise was made, we're never going to use that. There's a knock box. We have signs that say no trespassing. Half the homes in Rancho de Maria are rentals. Do you think kids aren't going to give out the numbers to people going in and out? We don't care. I heard Judith Dale talk behind me. Do people in Rancho de Maria not want people walking through? I don't care if people walk through, but we pay in our homeowners association fees an awful lot of money for that park and those barbecues. And we had, prior to this, a number of people coming in using those barbecues for which we pay a significant fee. People are going to come over and use them if they have the codes. I don't care if anybody walks through, but I don't want to pay for the barbecues for people to come over because it's a beautiful spot. And the trails and all that. Experience. It's just a word that we use for the mistakes that we've made. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Jim. Mark Kavanaugh, step on it.
Thank you. Mark Kavanaugh, 72 Six Flags Circle, also a 31-year resident of the city of Buellton. I've been coming home from work where I work at the golf course over in the Alsall. When I come home from work, it sometimes takes 3 and 4 light changes to get past Albertsons. So anybody that wants to tell me about the pollution mitigation is making a very specious argument. Very specious. I don't buy it at all. I didn't move here to sit through 4 traffic lights to get home from Solvang. We got to start thinking, folks. We're ruining the community that we all moved here for, that we loved, and you're just running it right into the ground. That's all I have to say. Get smart, folks.
Thanks, Mark. Peggy Brierton.
Good evening, Mayor Sierra, council members, Peggy Brierton, Buellton resident. Wow, I mean, there's a lot of things I like about this project. There's a lot of things that I don't like. And I believe there is a need for a second pathway to Industrial Way. I don't think one is enough, and I think that the gentleman that just spoke is absolutely right. I mean, there is no guarantee that future council and future traffic issues doesn't open that emergency permanently. So I think that that is something I would like to hear a little more discussion on, and how you could absolutely guarantee that that does not become a thoroughfare on a regular, permanent basis. The other thing is, I noticed that we have a bike and trail master plan, and I know that there's a lot of wonderful trails planned on the south side of this project. However, our bike and trail master plan has one right alongside Zaca Creek. And now, it may be in here that they're building that trail, the pedestrian trail along Zaca Creek. I don't see that on here. And one of the things we're talking about is getting people, moving people around other than using by car that they can access easily. So if Rancho de Maria people want to go to the hub, but the hub people can't get through to Rancho de Maria to get to Avenue of Flags, that they have to go up and around Industrial Way to do that, that's not logical, and that's not a productive and proper way to have people moving about. It's illogical. Zaca Creek has a pedestrian trail planned. It's in our bike and trail master plan, and that's an access for the community at large, and it should be built. And pardon me if it is part of this project, I just don't see that as on this project. I do realize that it butts up against Rancho de Maria, and you have to do some work talking with them, and they have to okay their portion of it. I understand that from the document that I read today, but I believe that that has to be discussed in further and definitely included in this project. I think that's it, the main issues. Thank you.
Thanks, Peg.
And let me just address the trail. It's our intent to have the trail in Zaca Creek, but it wasn't completely spelled out in the conditions, so I think we should add that condition as part of the restoration of Zaca Creek to include that trail. So thank you, Peggy, for bringing that up. And emergency access, again, we have a condition that it's limited to ingress and egress for emergency, and that's defined as emergency responders and evacuations only. So that is a condition of approval that can't be violated. It can be changed in the future, but that would require public hearing, et cetera, so it cannot just be open.
Great.
Judith Dill.
Boy, this is a tough one. I do like the project, and I'm certainly going to leave the car issue to the experts. I think there are some real issues with egress and certainly emergencies, but I'm not going to speak to that. What I want to speak to is in our visioning plan, we want Buellton to be pedestrian friendly. And can people from the hub get to the golf course? Can they walk to the golf course? Which is right there.
They would, if they hit the city trail along the river, then they could go east-west, and that would get onto the city golf course property. So if Johnny and Susie wanted to go to Ellen's to get an ice cream cone, can Johnny and Susie get to Ellen's without going out to 246, or out Industrial Way to 246 and walking along 246? Once the trail system connects to Avenue of Flags, that would be part of that connection. But that wouldn't go to Rancho de Maria. That would be on the city property to the Avenue of Flags.
Right. So they could walk along Zaca Creek on the trail. That's going to happen, correct?
Correct.
Okay, so there is egress, pedestrian and bike egress from the hub to Avenue of Flags without going out to 246.
And without going through Rancho de Maria.
Right, right. It would be along Zaca Creek, which is sort of along that.
Santa Ynez River, wouldn't it?
Correct.
Not Zaca Creek.
Well, there's a trail up Zaca Creek that will eventually get up to the avenue, but not fully connected as part of this project. But the river trail, again, would go to the avenue.
So they would go to where the river, to the bridge, and then have to walk along Avenue of Flags to Ellen's?
That would probably be the first trail.
That's correct.
And then Zaca Creek eventually.
However, and don't get me wrong, I have lots of friends, close friends, that live in Rancho de Maria, so I don't want to disadvantage them at all. But Rancho de Maria streets are city public streets, correct?
That is correct, but the access to get to the streets is not public. That is Rancho de Maria property, so we're not having public access through that private property other than the access to the golf course, which is the road that goes down to it. But this property does not have any direct access to the public streets of Rancho de Maria.
Okay, yet Rancho de Maria folks have access to the hub with this one-way gate.
Just to the walking trail.
Correct.
Yes.
I mean, are you going to sit there and I mean, I live in Thumbelina Village, and we had this discussion about, is Glenora going to become a thoroughfare? And what we did is we allow bike and pedestrian access back and forth between, the development and Thumbelina Village. Why don't we do that with this? I mean, it's the same exact thing. I mean, I certainly don't want Johnny and Susie going to where the bridge is and then having to go over to try to get to Ellen's or go, for pizza or whatever. If we're a pedestrian-friendly town, we can solve this.
Totally different situation. Glenora is a public street that butts up to the Crossroads property, so it's easy to get access to the trail that was developed through the Crossroads property. This property butts up against private property, not the city public street. We would have to obtain pedestrian easements, etc., and they do not have to grant those.
I think the concern, Judith, is that the Rancho de Maria has their private property with their picnic grounds, with the park, with the basketball courts, with the tennis courts, and that is private property. And if you have access going both ways, then there's the potential for people to use the private property on Rancho de Maria.
Yeah, I can understand that. I mean, it's not right that public comes and uses their park and that sort of thing. All I'm asking is for some way for, once again, Johnny and Susie to get safely to the avenue or, to downtown Buellton. And it seems like in our visioning, where we want to become a pedestrian-friendly city, and for 51 or 50 housing units not to be able to walk on public streets for safe, then I don't know. I just, once again, it's a hard issue.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Dan Durbiano, step on up.
How you doing? Good.
And by the way, before you speak, you are my last speaker. If anybody wants to get up,
Anybody else?
now's your
I
chance.
think you had one more.
Do I have?
Steve Fritz?
Yeah. Should be there.
Okay. Sorry about that, sir. You're not the last speaker. Dan, go ahead.
Council members, Madam Mayor, Dan Durbiano. I live in Rancho de Maria, 75 Six Flags Circle. At first, my main concern was what I do for a living. I work for Goleta Water District. I deal with water treatment, water distribution. Infrastructure was my first thought with this. What is the impact with the infrastructure? Are we going to be able to support it? And then secondly, in that same area is we've just come out of a major drought, probably the worst drought that the state of California has seen. And as of 2 days ago, California Department of Water Resources, the control board, has already started to think about reinstituting the 25% mandatory reduction in water so that we won't run into the same problem that we've seen over the last 2-3 years. Personally, being in Goleta, if you drive down through there, you can see how it's exploded, and it's ridiculous. And I think it's very negligent of the city of Goleta, and I think it would be negligent of the city of Buellton to allow any more development until something happens with the water, until we get back up to and above historic lows, which is what we have right now. Kachuma, we got all that rain last year. Kachuma is only at 46% of capacity. I understand we do get recharge through Kachuma for the 4 wells here, but we've got to think long term. What is the impact for the natural resources? My second thought with this was we've seen the development that went in over here off of Kaylor. We've seen the development with mixed usage on the Avenue of Flags and where Tractor Supply is on McMurray. I look at the commercial space, I see vacant commercial space. I look behind the commercial space and I see vacant land where there was supposed to be buildings. And I don't think it's the right direction for the city. I think it's irresponsible for the city to allow this growth and not be able to fill it. And then after listening as far as the traffic, that's something completely that I overlooked. I'm the father of 3 sons. One of them drives, 2 of them will be driving. They want to run up the street with their friends. They want to cross 246. Right now, I'll go on ahead with them, but the increased traffic, especially through Industrial Way and onto 246, we've already seen what traffic's done. It's mastatized at McMurray in 246. I can only imagine what it's going to do here at Six Flags, or at Avenue of Flags. So I would plead with you to at least look at it from the natural resources part, look what it's going to do to our infrastructure, and look what it's going to do to our streets.
Thank you very much, sir. And last, but certainly not least, Mr. Stephen Fritz.
I think I wanted to get last. Too much to follow up. Hello, good evening. I want to start by first saying all the wonderful good stuff, which is I like the development. Mr. Moore, you did your homework very well, and talking with the community at Rancho de Maria, I'm very impressed. You didn't, as you stated yourself, just drop some buildings on a piece of land, which is nice. I do like the trails, the habitat. I'm for that. I'm for the idea in general. I'm going to go pretty quick for the time for everybody else, and because I have a lot to just say that everybody else has already said, so go on to that. I'll start by saying that I am fairly pro limited growth or slow growth. I'm definitely not for big growth. I grew up in Goleta. I grew up in Santa Barbara, born and raised off Patterson. Saw the lemon fields turn into condos. Saw added housing, added traffic to Cathedral Oaks, bike to school, etc. More cars, blah blah blah. I work in Goleta for over a decade, the same company by Glen Annie and Los Caneros. I've seen what Goleta has done, which has just been mentioned. I'm upset at what Goleta has done and the density that they have built. I think it's ridiculous. I agree with the negligence. I have seen the legitimate impact at Glen Annie, at getting on the freeway, at getting off the freeway, at Los Caneros, even at Fairview, at the freeway, going southbound to get off at Los Caneros. That never used to back up and now backs up every day, which is a little bit crazy. I have concerns, as I already mentioned, with a single point of egress and ingress. Safety standpoint, I don't think that's very good. I wasn't aware of the only 73 parking spaces that Mr. King brought up. That was for housing, but I agree. I think you're going to have anywhere from 50 to 100 cars just in the residential zone, and 50 to 100 cars going in and out at one spot within about a 45-minute period is going to impact that one light immensely, as well as getting on and off. We all know that there's really 3 entrance and exits from McMurray, from 246, and Santa Rosa. The best one, of course, is the 246 entrance and exit to 101. Sorry. But they're all going to be impacted. The smart people will take Santa Rosa. The other smart people will go to McMurray. The people, I don't remember it, but the housing condos at McMurray, those smart people, of course, will go to that McMurray exit. The other ones will attempt to go to 46 and probably fail. Again, I've already noticed the impact in the last few years of living here, of coming on and off the freeway there and having that back up. You have 50 to 100 cars added to that in about a 30, 45-minute window, and you're going to back up onto the freeway. I think that's definitely going to happen. I am very concerned at the water usage. Somebody mentioned Kachuma's at 48%. I checked it a couple days ago. SB's current rainfall summary said it was 38%. Yeah, it's bad. It's very bad. It's been that way for a long time. We know that. It got down to about 7% or 7-8% before we had our heavy rains. I'm very concerned about water usage and growing and the density, the quality of life. We have a small town. I love it. It's why one of the reasons I came here instead of staying in Goleta. I think you did a great job designing it. I love the architecture, the design. Again, you didn't just slap up buildings. I don't personally like 3 stories. I'd rather keep it 2, etc. Mirror a bunch of comments that Mr. King already said. Mirror some of the comments our Caltrans person said as well. I think lastly, Traffic Answers is not adding more signals. They added more signals in Goleta by Hollister and Glen Annie, and it's utterly horrible, and I avoid it as much as possible, and I go different routes to get to different stores so that I don't have to go through there. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Alrighty, seeing no other speaker slips, I am closing the public hearing, bringing it back to council for discussion. Water issues, can you address that?
I can have our Public Works Director address that. We don't get our water from Kachuma. We get it from the state water and from the 2 groundwater basins, and we have had no issues with our groundwater basins, and we're working on a management plan for those. But we have planned for development in the city and our water resources. So, Rose, if you want to
Right.
tie into that a little.
Development of all these existing vacant parcels has already been included in the valuation for the city's current water supply. So that has been taken into account, and there is adequate supply to accommodate this growth at this time.
And there is drought tolerant is the landscaping, and they do have infiltration basins to replenish the storm water that comes through. So all of those factors, we don't see that as impacting our water sustainability.
Okay. And I guess it's just a matter of which report you look at. One of my concerns is the traffic on industrial. I do know as a member of Santa Barbara County Association of Governments, I've brought up our McMurray 246 problem with the new shopping center numerous times and have been told that it's not really Caltrans' concern. And it does get very frustrating. I really hope that you are serious about wanting to offer some help here, because we do have a problem in our town. And I was under the understanding that when that shopping center was built out, that Caltrans would take a look and make adjustments. And I've been told at Santa Barbara County that is not true, that Caltrans is pretty much done with it. So if you are truly interested in helping us with that problem, moving to Industrial Way, the street is fairly wide at the corner intersection of Industrial and 246. If we do discover, you're saying we're not going to have a problem, Caltrans is saying that they believe that there will be a problem. If we move forward with this project and we run into issues, can they be addressed? I mean, McMurray, obviously, we've said that could be addressed, and we're still having problems there.
We're still trying to get the right-of-way for that one. That's the issue with McMurray. I don't know if there's space to restripe Rose.
Not at this time. It's one lane each direction. We have parking on both sides of the street, so that's the limiting factor there. And the street parking is, a critical need, particularly on Industrial Way. So if we need to widen, we'd have to go.
So you could put a provision in for us to take a look at that in the future, because we can get rid of the parking along the frontage there and get the additional lanes in if that's needed.
Okay. Yeah, I like that. And then, of course, my other comment, and I've spoken to Gavin about it, I truly do like the project. When the townhomes were built, the low income, the element was instead of having any low income affordable, for the townhomes, the money went into an account so that Buellton could use it later for affordable housing. And on this project,
well, the other one was actually,
put towards the senior apartments, the 49.
The senior apartments are built, they get the money back.
Which we've been trying for 10 years. That's one of the empty spots behind the shopping center that people are looking at, that we were trying to put in affordable senior apartments and have not been able to move forward on that. I would like to see that 15% put into this project. And whether it's low income, affordable, with workers on industrial, Buellton's going to run out of room. And we aren't having very much luck. We were looking at a piece of property for low-income, affordable housing, and that didn't pan out. And I just think, we need to start including that in our projects.
Well, we would keep the workforce provision in, but we do have standard affordability conditions for inclusionary to add those to the units. So if you like, I can hand those out to you.
We've got to start. So.
Does it reference, is this in our packet also, Mark? Is this a certain page, or this just an addendum?
That would be, if you want to require it, then we would put those conditions into the conditions of approval for the project.
Mark, if I may.
You can ask the mayor.
So, if you can go to the, just past the slide present, I did put a slide in here because, Messier, following our conversation the other day, next one down, so this one. I thought about our discussion that we had about the affordable and how to provide affordable housing. And we've been involved in a number of affordable housing projects, as we touched on.
You told me, yeah.
And as we spoke yesterday, that both the city and the county of Santa Barbara have gone back to in lieu fees. The city has really encouraged in lieu fees, so that what they've been able to do is to leverage that money 3 or 4 times over to purchase existing buildings and then have rehabilitated those existing buildings and ended up getting far more units than 5 units in a particular project. The second component of this is management level of very low and affordable units requires that each of those tenants to submit financial income statements on an annual basis to ensure that they are at the income levels. Private entities aren't set up to do that, and to select 5 units or 8 units within a particular project and say those need to be included as inclusionary is a very, very difficult thing to manage and evict people as a private owner versus a non-profit. So that's why the county and the city have in turn gone back to inclusionary fees and running existing buildings. And I will say, no offense, I haven't seen any government agency run affordable housing or build affordable housing effectively. I just haven't seen it because they fail to start with one thing, and it's the most important thing, a buildable pro forma to make sure it actually works. And I'll be happy to help and be happy to look at project sites. As I said, I'd be happy to look at the townhome site for the senior centre to see if that works. But at the end of the day, that's where it all starts. Is it financially viable, and can affordable units be managed by a private entity? And I have not seen that happen. Yes, I support people's self-help housing. Yes, I support Cabrillo, and I wish they would. We've done everything that we can to help them move forwards.
I know, 10 years.
And just one last thing. I've heard a lot of comments about traffic here. If ever there was a project that actually takes a step towards reducing traffic by marketing it to local people, by marketing it to local workforce, this is it. And this is a project site that's been planned for a long, long time. What would the traffic count been if it was built as a hotel and racquetball court as it was originally planned? So I think we've taken the density into consideration. We've taken the traffic volumes into consideration, and I'll leave it at that at this point.
Thank you very much. Just a quick question, Mark. The Chumash, the Buellton apartments, have a very low proponent.
Yes,
how is that being managed?
That is being, it was a work in progress with the management company because they were not experts in that, but through Andrea and myself and the city attorney, we worked out the program of reviewing the applications, and they would screen them, give them to us to verify, and it has worked. It was a little learning curve for them because they were a private entity not used to doing that.
And do you check their annually?
Yes, we do get those reports in annually, and then somebody leaves and they redo it, and we get the new applications. So it is doable, and we have been doing it with the Buellton apartments, but it is easier with a nonprofit such as Vintage Walk and Valley Station are being run by the Housing Authority, and they manage those units and report to us. So.
Right. We just haven't added any new units in quite a while.
That is correct.
Questions, comments?
Comments? I think it's a good project. I think Gavin's made headway with communicating with the people on Industrial Way. Having worked 1 year when I was in school up at Edna Valley as a cellar rat, washing barrels and stuff during crush, if you get 20 minutes just to take 5, because it is 24 during that crush time. So having the, hopefully Terravant would be buying into some of these, just getting a chance to take 5, I think would be a big plus. You'll lessen the traffic. Those people who have to be there during those long work hours will not have to commute to Lompoc or someplace else. Mixed use is something that I think we're looking at to improve, and I think this project does it. I understand Judith's concerns. I think that's something to look at. I just don't see where we can force private owners to open up their property. So unfortunately, this is not a two-way street. It's going to be just one way in that case. And I don't know, I don't think Steve or anybody can give us an answer on that. So I think it's a good project. I think they've looked at all the traffic concerns and so forth. I think it's something that Buellton can use long-term.
I appreciated the story poles and drove not 360 degrees because it's not available, but I think about 250 degree area, and the topography, because I received calls from people, what is going on? When you're standing on the ground or in Industrial Way, the story poles looked way out of proportion. When you go up to Shadow Mountain, and again other streets in the city of Buellton, they were you were looking over the top. You will see the rooftops of the development, and I just thought that helped a lot. I don't know how many people that don't like the project took the time to put their eyes on ground level rather than standing on the ground and looking up. But compared to some of the tall projects we've built in the Buellton in the past, I think this is a welcomed addition to a topography standpoint that you've drawn in your renderings, and I favor the project. I think it's everyone talks out of we need a place we can work and live, workforce housing, and this offers a wide range of. It's not one person or one employer. It's open to everybody, and I think you've been as inclusive as a developer can be. So I endorse it, support it.
Vice Mayor?
Oh, what's the timeline? I'm sorry.
Sorry, we're waiting for, if we're successful and hopefully obtain approval tonight, we're ready to be moving forwards. We got construction documents through planning process, so that's probably at least 8-9 months would be my guess.
Okay, within a year. Okay, thank you.
Wow, where do I start? My concerns once again on this project is one, the traffic. As it says right in here that there's going to be over 300 parking spaces. Well, I don't know what kind of traffic survey you did, but common sense will tell you that if it is built out, if they're all occupied, you have commercial and every one of those people are in those buildings. Industrial is going to have over 300 cars per day associated with that project. And you can say, well, we want to make a work and live place. You can't make people live there. This isn't communist China where we say you work in this factory, you have to live in our housing, and then we're going to take it out of your check for the housing that we made you live in. So you can't make people that work on industrial live in those apartments that you're going to build associated with this project. The other concern that I have is for the people that are in Rancho de Maria. Saying that a gate that the people from Rancho de Maria have a code to that they can go in and out to the hub and then back to their house. And if you're saying it's a one-way gate that keeps these people out that live in this project from Rancho de Maria, that's no more realistic than all four of us are going to bust into spontaneous combustion right here on the dais. You're going to have people going out of that project in the Rancho de Maria where people pay for association fees to have all of those things kept up for them by their association fees. So you're not going to keep people out of there. In my mind, I'm just connecting the dots. Housing down there with the noise for me is a problem. And you're going to have people complain because I'm a pilot, used to fly into Santa Monica. People buy houses in Santa Monica and then they complain about the airport. Well, it's been there since 1928. So you're going to have these people complaining, whether you say, well, you know, the Terrebonne has these trucks coming in and out of here and want you to know that before you rent this. But they're going to rent it anyways, and then they're going to complain about it. This is why I have a problem with the residential being down there in the first place. The other issue I have about the traffic is that we have a lot of people that spend a lot of money on industrial to put businesses down there. Some of them are retail businesses, some are just manufacturing, some of them restaurants. There's a lot going on in industrial, and if I go down there and it's such a hassle for me to drive down an industrial, I'm not going there. So what does that do to the people that are already there? Their businesses may go out of business, so what kind of service are we doing for them? I moved out of Goleta for the very reason that they have lost their minds. I don't know if any of you have seen how much is being built down in Goleta, and I moved out of there, and it's insanity. So I move up here. So what are we going to do? Are we going to allow all these projects to come into the city of Buellton, and traffic impact, and the hassles, and the frustration? It's a Stanford rat study. So I don't think that it's really fair in my mind, and this is just my opinion as a citizen of this town, that we should just keep putting development after development after development in the city of Buellton until nobody wants to live here anymore. And we have basically destroyed the very reason that most of us in this room came here in the first place.
Thank you, Dave.
Okay. I do believe it's a good project. I think the density has been kept down, which I appreciate. It could have been a lot taller, it could have been a lot bigger. That's what the property is zoned for. I think you've been very considerate in trying to work with neighbors. I'm not sure that your one-way gate's a great idea. I think maybe you just shouldn't, there should be no going back from one side to the other. Just keep it locked, and if they want to come down to the hub or to Terrebonne, and then they can come the public route that the way everybody else does. That way the code doesn't get passed along to anybody and it goes back and forth. You just keep it locked. And again, the city has done affordable housing, the inclusionary ordinance, with the Buellton apartments, and I would really like to see it attempted here. If it doesn't work, then it doesn't work, but I'd really, really like to see the attempt made to do that. Other than that, I think it's a good project. So, is there a motion?
You can start with the environmental one, which doesn't have anything to do with the conditions.
Gentlemen?
So which one is this, Mark?
That would be the first
That
one.
would be 1801. Oh, 1802, I'm sorry.
1802 and 3, I think. Is it 2? It's
So
two,
the
right.
first one would be 18-02.
Resolution 1802.
Yeah, that's what I meant.
Well, I'd make a motion to approve resolution number -1802 as stated.
Linda?
We have to have a second.
Mark, you
Second,
want
I'm
them to read
sorry.
it?
No, they don't have to read it, but as worded.
As worded, as presented. I will second that.
Okay, Linda?
Okay, Councilmember Mercado.
Aye.
Councilmember Andrusik.
Aye.
Vice Mayor King.
No.
And Mayor Sierra.
Aye. All righty.
All right, then the next one, just on condition 109, we just want to add Zacca Creek Trail to that condition. And then condition 107 is the affordable housing condition. So if the council wants to, the conditions I provided to replace number 107. Which is the in lieu fee condition.
Instead of the in lieu.
Right, so if you insert those instead of the in lieu.
Okay.
That should be
Do you want me
stated
to
as
go
part
ahead
of
and
the
do that
motion.
one then?
Yeah, that would work.
Okay.
That's why I stated that.
I move to adopt resolution number 1803 as worded with an inclusion of the Zacket Creek Trail and the affordable housing inclusion.
Yes.
I'll second.
Okay, Linda?
Okay, Mayor Sierra.
Aye.
Councilmember Mercado.
Aye.
Councilmember Andrusik.
Aye.
And Vice Mayor King.
No.
All righty. Moving on.
You want to take a little break?
We could take a break, and I want to thank everybody for coming. We're going to take a little break, so if you want to come up and give us a piece of your
within the city limits on industrial property, which we have denied. We're not allowing any within the city limits. They need to go to the county areas into the,
Is the county allowing it now? Have they?
not that I'm aware of. I have not got an update once I referred it to them. I don't know what they're doing.
The county is not allowing dumping on county property, but they can do it in city property.
They said do it on industrial property, so the only industrial property they can find is within city limits, and we're saying we really can't accommodate that material in our
No.
city limits.
No.
So there's and it's more for the private residences getting their loads hauled off. They can't find a place to dump it because the county won't allow it, and Granite won't take it because they're taking the other materials. So there's a big gap as where his material's
Yeah.
going. But as far as the city limits goes, we are not taking any within the city limits, and that's our policy at this point.
And I would just imagine there's a federal agency that would insist on knowing what the composition
There
of
is,
that
and they are testing it regularly, and it's FEMA and the Army Corps as well as the county are monitoring and getting the reports from Granite on the material.
So would there be maybe a space we could refer people to that have concern that
I give them to Joan Hartman's office and
very
County
good.
Public Works. Those are the two places they need to talk to.
You know, it's laughable that they're taking that off of county property and they won't let it
I
put
know.
it back on county property
But-
because Montecito's in the county.
Yeah.
Well, and that they do
Right.
their streets and everything,
Mhm.
they have a place for it, but private residents,
They
don't
don't.
have a place for it.
And just to let you know, when I do get a call from a resident or from somebody outside the city limits regarding the Granite operation, I do explain all of this to them. I don't just shove them off to the county. I try to explain as much as I can, but then give them the contact numbers for the county people to further follow up with. So,
But do we have to worry about people who are at the border of the city limits dumping farther upland? Is that a concern that we have?
yes, and we monitor
During the
that.
floodplain,
Yeah, we want to
these-
make sure and they can't do it near creeks and things like that, so, and I've already talked to county about that, so. The city did get a beautification award from Solvang Rotary for the City Hall landscaping. So Mayor Sierra and I are going to go to a 7 o'clock in the morning breakfast did you want to go to that, Vice Mayor King? It's 7 o'clock Tuesday morning.
It's that?
Yeah, of course. Do that.
I'll go ahead and contact the person and let them know you can attend. But we're getting in the award, they'll show the pictures, etc. So.
Lovely.
And the RV ordinance will be at the next meeting, and it's basically what was directed by the council. So we'll move forward on that, and that is it on my report.
All righty, Mr. McEwen.
Item number 6 is a conference with real property negotiators. This is under Government Code Section 54956.8 involving the property at APN 099283010. It's 495 Avenue of Flags. City negotiator is Mark Brodzinski. The parties are the City of Buellton and Nancy Lee Williams of the Williams Revocable Trust. And the purpose of the closed session is to discuss possible acquisition terms and price. It is not anticipated that there will be any report out of closed session.
All righty.